Tarkov Arena has been out for a while now, and let's be honest, it's not living up to the hype. While it promised to bring fast-paced, competitive action to Tarkov, is it really a worthy addition to the game? In this video, I'm going to break down the harsh realities of Arena, and whether or not it's a mode you should actually bother with. Trust me, some of these issues are going to make you rethink jumping in. Let's not sugarcoat it. There are some serious flaws with Arena, but don't worry, I'll balance it out with a few positives at the end. But first, let's dive into the problems. Let's start with the biggest issues with Arena, and frankly there are quite a few. First, the lack of the survival element that makes Tarkov what it is. Arena has stripped out one of the core aspects of Tarkov, the brutal survival experience. No more looting for precious gear, no more nail-biting moments where you're trying to extract with your hard-earned loot. Instead, you're just thrown into a match where the stakes feel paper-thin. You die, you respawn, simple. The sense of loss and tension that make Tarkov such a wild ride is completely absent here, and no amount of updates will fix that fundamental issue. Sure, you get the combat, but you miss everything that makes Tarkov Tarkov. Oh shit! Oh, I'm dead. How? Second thing is the gameplay, and it's repetitive. Even after updates, Arena doesn't really feel very fresh. The maps are small, and the modes are very predictable. The combat quickly becomes a grind. Sure, we've seen a few new maps and modes, but they're all just variations of the same thing. Tight spaces, where you either just run and gun, or hide and hope for the best. After a few hours, everything starts to feel the same. It's not the deep, dynamic gameplay that Tarkov's open world raids provide. It's just rinse and repeat. The next thing is the gear imbalance. Arena promises a more streamlined, competitive environment, but all it really does is throw players into a race to find the most overpowered setups. While recent updates have tinkered with balance, certain weapons and armors are still going to reign supreme, and guess what? If you're not using the meta gear, you're at a serious disadvantage. Some of the most recent updates have made few changes to the core weapon balancing, which means some setups are just too strong, and it makes the whole experience feel like you're stuck in a never-ending arms race. Another issue, the lack of risk is just plain boring. In Tarkov, the fear of losing everything keeps you on edge. Arena has none of that. If you die, you just respawn and go at it again. Sure, they've added some rewards for winning, but recently these have been toned down. They frankly just don't hold a candle to the adrenaline rush of walking away from a Tarkov raid with your loot intact. It's not about skill, it's about spamming matches until you come out on top. Arena could learn a thing or two about risk management. So here's the thing. Arena doesn't really feel like Tarkov. It's a complete departure from the hardcore tactical experience that Tarkov has built its entire reputation on. The moment you jump into a match, it feels like you've stepped into a completely different game. Tarkov's DNA is in there somewhere, but it's been watered down to the point where it almost feels like a cheap knockoff. Okay, I'll give credit where it's due. Arena isn't all bad. It does have a few redeeming qualities, just don't expect them to fix the deeper issues. So, we'll get into those now. First, let's talk about the competitive aspect. If you're into PvP and want a more controlled environment to show off your skills, Arena does deliver that. It's all about PvP, and while the mode can feel repetitive, the team-based gameplay is fairly solid. The updates to squad mechanics and communication features have definitely made coordinating with your teammates more rewarding at least. Next thing is the loadout customization. It is actually now one of the better features in Arena. While the presets that they first launched with were heavily scrutinized, the new system is much better. That being said, they are kind of a double-edged sword. The fact that you get to bring your own gear into combat adds a layer of strategy. If you love customizing your weapons and gear, this is a feature that allows for some degree of personalization, so that can be seen as a positive. The next thing is the updates that they've made to matchmaking. They've tried to make it more consistent. Early on, Arena suffered from some really unbalanced matchups, but the patches that have occurred over time have worked to fix this somewhat. You're now more likely to get into a fair competitive match with players of similar skill. This makes the experience more enjoyable for players who just want to compete rather than feeling like they're steamrolled by veterans. The last thing I'm going to talk about is speed. Arena offers quick, action-packed matches. For those who don't have the time to commit to a full Tarkov raid, Arena provides a fast alternative. With shorter matches and quicker respawns, you can get your PvP fix without having to invest hours at a time. So, is Arena worth it? After all the updates, it still feels like a side project, rather than something that could stand on its own. For players who want a competitive, action-focused experience, it's fun for a short while, but it's hard to shake the feeling that Arena is nothing more than a distraction from Tarkov's core gameplay. If you're craving quick matches, more action, less survival grind, Arena may still scratch that itch, but if you're a hardcore Tarkov player who thrives on risk, immersion, and the stakes of the regular raids, Arena probably isn't gonna hold your attention for that long. Despite the updates, it still feels like a watered down version of what makes Tarkov great. So there you have it, the brutal truth of the Arena game mode. The pros are there, but the cons are also hard to ignore. What do you think? Are the updates enough to save it, or is Arena just another mode that's missed the mark? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.